Just like that.
So it's live.
You tell me you go live and you go live. Here we are. What's up, everybody? Want to welcome everyone to this edition of the WEBINA&R sessions. Although we don't have a lot of A&Rs today, we actually stepping outside the box and having a separate conversation. Want to go around briefly and just have everyone introduce themselves because, again, I guess my descriptions of people weren't good enough, thanks to Rory and his his Twitter followers dragging me on social media. So maybe we should just have everybody quickly just run around and briefly introduce themselves, a little background, and then we can jump into this all important conversation. Then I will start, of course, be a gentleman, and Miss Terri Thomas can go first.
Awesome. Happy to be here. I'm Terri Thomas. I'm in Houston, Texas. I'm the operations manager for Radio 1 here. So I have 4 stations. I've got 97.9 The Box, Magic 102.1. I've got 92.1 Radio Now, which is our top 40 station. I also have an online gospel inspiration station here as well. And that's it. Originally from Boston. Boston bred, Houston fed.
Oh, there we go. Let's see, Brocky.
Brock Korsan, an A&R, worked at many labels, managed many producers, probably most notably known for like working with Kendrick and Q in the TDE camp. Yeah, I'm just a record man.
Simple. Brother Geespin.
What's up? It's Geoff, Geespin, Gamere. I, like Terri, am also from Boston. I started as a club DJ and kind of a backpack battle DJ, and then moved into radio. I started at 94.5 in Boston, and then made my way to New York City, Power 105, and worked there for a while, and jumped over to the agency world for a quick bit, and bounced around and consulted, and now I'm over at SiriusXM helping them launch a couple of platforms over there. So glad to be here with a lot of good friends and people I know well.
Thank you, Brother G.
Yes, sir.
And when I say brother, I kind of almost like literally mean brother with Rory. Seeing how we
Yes, we are fraternity brothers in real life. Name is Rory. Of course, from the flyer that Eddie put, co-host of the Joe Budden Podcast, and that's the only thing I've ever done in my life.
You approved it though.
Currently managing an R&B alternative group by the name of Emotional Oranges. Also the GM of Duce Palooza, and amongst some other things that will be happening this year that I can announce post-COVID.
No live exclusive announcements today? No,
but I do need to talk to Sam about a Lucky Daye thing that has to do with it after this call.
Segueing right into Mr. Sam Waters.
Hey, I'm Sam Waters. So I started off in the group Color Me Bad in the early 90s. Then I graduated being a producer and a writer. Did that for about 10 years. Did the A&R thing at Island Records, and now I'm managing. I'm blessed to manage Lucky Daye with my partners, Natalie Prosper and Paris Hans.
My man, last but not least, Sascha.
Yeah, I'm Sascha. I started throwing parties in college. Some of y'all went to them. Brocky, you sure did. And then from there, we started throwing concerts, and we threw some festivals. We do Astroworld in Dreamville. We have 7 festivals in North America. It's called ScoreMore. We're partnered with Live Nation. And I'm very proud for my sole management client to be Mr. Tory Lanez. We've been working together since 2011. It's an honor and a privilege. Every day is an adventure. But yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you everybody for taking the time out to come in and have the conversation. And as I had stated before we jumped in live, is, there obviously has been a lot going on in the world, COVID, and obviously all the racial kind of tensions going on, the protests. But more recently, specifically in the music business, we've been debating the term urban and, the historical context and what it means. And if we, ban it or use it going forward and how it plays into the whole scope of the business. So I thought it would be important to, have a conversation with people who are not Black, and I will be politically incorrect, who are not Black, but live in the, for lack of a better word, urban world, whether that's, you know, at radio or management or at labels. So let's just jump into it, and anybody can start. I just want to get your perspective on, you know, the hot topic that's been going on for the last few weeks. And I guess I'll start once again, ladies first, with Ms. Terri Thomas.
You know, my perspective is I think it's still necessary because things aren't fair and equal across the board. And so to me, it's about making sure that people have a seat at the table. And I get to dabble in different worlds, so they have a top 40 station as well. And the box, 97.9 The Box, it's, you know, rhythmic, but also some people consider it urban. So I'm sort of on two panels there. So I get to see, you know, the best of both worlds. And then I have an adult urban station. So that's a whole different subject. I don't know if that actual title fits the format anymore. It's really an R&B station, but that, you know, besides itself, you know, I just feel like it's necessary still because, you know, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. We're stripping away the title, but we haven't made sure all things are equal. And I think that things are not equal and not fair. And artists that are considered one genre over another, you know, tend to get better treatment. And so I think that's not okay. And so I'm an advocate of keeping the term because it means that we're forcing people to keep attention on something that I think is invaluable and very important. You know, it's interesting to see, you know, some artists like, you know, we'll talk about Texas, great artist here, Khalid, who really has had a lot of success in the pop world, but there's a reluctancy to promote that there, you know, and try to keep people in a particular box. I know when I first became acquainted with Lizzo from a label perspective, you know, it was, oh, Lizzo is an adult urban artist. And I was like, well, why is she an adult urban artist? You know, it's because she's voluptuous and she's a woman of color. And so automatically she has to go there. So, you know, I think we're dealing with a lot of stereotypes all the way around, but my fear is that things are not created equal and there's not really equal opportunity and there's not equal resources. So if we do away with the title, it takes away the conversation and there's no accountability. So that's really one of the things that I think about regarding that.
G, I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Terri in a lot of ways. You know, the one thing that kind of really, and even more to her point, in terms of resources, if you look at the budgets that get put forth by the labels, pop gets all the money, then it filters to rhythm, and then it filters to urban, and then probably UAC. So, you know, it's funny when Republic made the announcement, I perked up. I thought it was interesting. There's something that I always kind of had a little bit of a problem in terms of the way things have been classified in, let's say, media-based for any terms, right? Like, to me, it should be, it's been clearly defined that urban now is the code word for hip hop and R&B, right? And then rhythm has kind of always been, to Terry's point, has kind of been able to play the middle and go back and forth. And, you know, at sometimes rhythmic radio is Pitbull and high tempo Neo, and just kind of depending on where the flux goes. And then other times it becomes very trap and, you know, wherever the current hip hop sound is. And then, you know, pop is just always pop. And so, you know, the more and more I thought about it, and kind of also hearing how it went down in Republic, where the staff wasn't even notified that the change was being made, which is so blind and deaf to what's going on now. I mean, if you're going to make a change like that and announce it and put it in a press release, you should probably tell the heads of your department that you're thinking about doing it. That's the first problem with making the move in general. You know, so, but, you know, the more and more I started, you know, hearing about it, to Terry's point, I think it makes sense to, you know, certainly keep it for now until we figure out, you know, how we're going to get more people in the positions that they need to be in, first and foremost. And, you know, even, you know, she talks about, you know, Khalil, you know, the problem is there's so many of these big hip hop and R&B records that just stop at rhythm. They don't go top 40. I mean, you know, Sasha's on the call. I mean, I'm sure he could tell you that there's been these monster Tory Lanez records that have never gotten a shot at top 40. But then even more to that point, and you know, Terri might know, I don't know any Black top 40 programmers currently. I'm sure there are some. It's probably a handful. I also think that's a major problem. I mean, I work with Thea Mitchum, who to me was the greatest mentor in my life and one of the greatest, people that I've ever worked with. And she programmed Top 40 radio for the longest time, and she could program up against the best of them, as can Terri. And it's that's even a little bit more disconcerting for me even than the title itself, is just the lack of kind of diversity as you climb up the formats. You have urban, and then rhythm kind of starts to weed out a little bit, and then Top 40, you can forget about it.
Sascha, speaking of Tory, and to Geespin's point, you manage arguably one of the most talented artist in the last 10 years, who obviously has been doing an amazing job really maximizing his time here at during the quarantine. But to G's point, and after I did the research as well, I didn't see Tory having a lot of top 40 success. I would love to hear your perspective on why you think that is, and the challenges that come along with that.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a huge part of frustration for us. I think Tory is one of, the biggest streaming artists, period. And, I was told for years that he wasn't eligible for pop playlists on DSPs because he wasn't streaming enough. I was told you couldn't get a song on today's top hits without doing 1 million streams a day. Tory had a song, The Take, with Chris Brown. It was streaming 800,000 plus a day on Spotify alone. And I was told until it hit that 1 million mark, it wasn't eligible. But then, you got no problem with some new pop artists. Now, in regards to the word, like, respectfully, I feel like my opinion doesn't matter. I'm here to be like an advocate in the best way that I can be. I know that there are a lot of Black artists that are signing upside down deals. I hate that, for me, my boss is Black. He, and I report to him. I don't know anything. I don't know the music. I'm just here to like play my role. I'm very lucky in that I have someone who's been loyal to me for now a decade. We've really been in this thing for a long time. I think when it comes to pop, we were always told that there were just barriers that to entry, and that was frustrating, and I think the fact that Tory has 12 songs on the Billboard Hot 100, and only 2 of them were ever worked formally to radio in our previous situation. From there, Tory started working records himself. I'm very excited to see what the next chapter, what lies in the next chapter. Tory makes incredible music, but I can definitely tell you for sure, when it came to whether it was pop playlisting or pop radio or any of those things, it was always made very clear that Tory wasn't there yet. The only ironic thing to us is that Tory's worth more tickets than a lot of people that are there already. So, I don't know, man. That's my take on
that. Sam, managing Lucky, who, again, is incredible. And over the last, I don't know, 3 to 4 years, maybe even a little bit longer, there was this narrative. Well, about 4 years ago, there was this narrative that, R&B is dead, R&B is dead. And then you had folks like, Bryson Tiller and her, and now Lucky is really leading that kind of resurgence, if you will. I'd love to hear your perspective on, some of the just your overall perspective, and then your challenges as it relates Lucky and being at a specific format, urban, adult, contemporary. We'll get into, kind of the antiquated term that is. And then would love to just hear some of your, in the 90s, at least for me, you had, you were part of one of the biggest groups and had one of the biggest songs, at least in my, growing, in my teenage years. So I would love to hear your perspective on that and being a part of that group, which was very multicultural. And how it kind of plays into everything. So sorry, I'm layering it up for you right now.
I'll give you my old man perspective. I've kind of lived through what we're talking about here from different sides of it. Starting with Color Me Bad, we came up through Kool and the Gang, who was like a Black group who embraced pop and was embraced by Top 40 radio, right? And so they kind of would preach to us about this line all the time, that you got to stay on the pop side of this line, you got to stay on the simple side of this line, just from a creative perspective, because if you go over here, they're not going to touch you at the biggest radio stations. You're not going to reach as many people. So that was kind of my early education that didn't quite, gel for me. And then, you know, through Color Me Bad, which we were multicultural, you know, we had a hit at R&B first, and then it crossed over to pop. And I'm sure, you know, two of us being white obviously helped a lot with that. And then on the other side of that, I remember us being up for 2 Soul Train awards, and we were up against Jodeci and Boyz II Men. And I remember just sitting there in the audience, like in front of the crowd, please don't let us win. Please don't let us win. You know, and because I could just tell, like, Jodeci should have won. You know, that was where the crowd was. And sure enough, we won and got booed. And I remember walking right past Janet Jackson trying to give me a hug, and I didn't even see it, which was really painful to watch back on TV. But, you know, like I've seen that side of it. And then with an artist like Lucky Daye, like, who is so versatile, who's been writing, you know, for a long time across different genres, and who just blows my mind as a writer and as an artist. You know, I don't want to see him get boxed in, you know. And so one of the things that we've been really careful with Tunji and the label and in our management company is trying to not just, you know, package him as one limited thing. You know, it's not like we don't want urban AC, if it's going to be called R&B or whatever, to play him. We do want them to play him. We absolutely want to hit that audience, but we also don't want to limit his audience. And, you know, the thing that I see happening more and more is that, you know, it's all blending and the lines are getting more and more blurred. And we were talking about pop. Well, pop is short for popular. And so if Top 40 is playing pop music, they should be playing the most popular music. That's it. You know, I don't think it, I don't really, I'm not a big fan of people getting shut out, especially based on their race, or, you know, just people, you know, putting people in the, it feels like human beings have a need to put things into a box, but we have to remember, you know, we're peddling art. This is art. And art is beyond that in a lot of ways, you know. So I would like to see relaxing of some of these restrictions, and because I think when people witness great music, great art, it connects with them and they react.
Yep. Brocky, from the label perspective, and it's funny because we've known each other for quite some time, and you know, I remember when you getting the job at Interscope, and it wasn't actually until maybe a couple of days ago, I just happened to be Googling something. I didn't know that your actual title was VP of Urban A&R at Interscope, which again kind of plays into the whole thing, right? Because I had a conversation this morning with Chris Anakute, who obviously is an A&R and is very successful in his own right. He's probably one of the only Black A&Rs that I know that actually solely kind of focus in the pop space, whether it be Katy Perry or Zara. I can't think of her name off the top of my head. But anyway, but he you know, his title wasn't, you know, VP of you know, pop A&R. So
Yeah.
you know, give me your perspective on everything from kind of the label standpoint. And then also would love to hear you talk about some of the things that Terri and G touched upon with respect to artists at radio and having, you know, to cross over, because you've worked with, you know, some very big artists, you know, Kendrick, Schoolboy, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, as far as the titling goes, I've never been a big fan of the word urban, you know. Granted, I know that we need to have not boundaries, but we need to have classifications for what it is that we're working in, right? I don't know what the solution is to the word urban, but it's just something I've never really been a fan of. Like, you know, and as far as the pop word goes, I never, I never considered pop a genre. You know, it's not really supposed to be a genre. It's short for popular. So, you know, it's a confusing thing when that has become, you know, a classification for a certain type of music. It's interesting, you know. I always felt the most popular music should be, you know, considered pop. Although I would definitely say that, you know, hip hop artists don't necessarily want that classification around their music either. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, and again, like I don't have a solution for that term right now, and I think that now it's part of the discussion that we will eventually find a happy medium. But I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question? Oh, we're talking about radio. Yeah. As far as radio goes, I mean, radio has always been kind of a tricky thing, especially now that streaming has come into play. So we have a classification of songs that are for radio that are pushed by the label, and then we have the playlists, and then we have the people who are actually streaming these records. So yeah, I don't it's one of those things that I think that being that urban music or rap music or hip hop is the most predominant art form that we have right now in terms of what's actually quote unquote popular. It's interesting to see that these songs that are number one on Billboard are not the biggest songs at radio. It's just it's kind of baffling at times.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, there definitely needs to be some discussion around that.
Brother Rory, who has done a lot in his career, but I only put the Joe Budden Podcast on the flyer. You sit in the middle of kind of the definition of culture right now with with what you're doing, whether it be obviously with Joe or with Henny Palooza, or excuse me, Duce Palooza, and all the other things that you're doing. So I just generally would love to get your perspective.
As far as the word urban goes, I'll start there just because that was the first quick topic. I don't really want to see that become just the Band-Aid to put over the cut, because people are now forced to have to pay attention whether they want to or not. Of course, we've seen a lot of brands just saying things to save face. So just taking the word urban out, I don't know if it should be done because the people that they're describing are asking them to do it. And those are the number one people that we should be focusing on. But I did see the music industry do this Blackout Tuesday thing, which I think is good in theory. But to the amount of power that labels hold over Black artists, to just say I'm not going to work on Tuesday, I think was really offensive. And then to say, well, we're going to take the day not to work to talk about shit. And then we're going to come out and address it. I haven't heard anything since. So I just don't want the word urban being taken out to be some type of solution to what's actually happening to the Black artists that all labels are profiting off of at the moment and have been for however many years. So that's where I'm kind of weird on the urban thing. It should be taken out, but that should not be our excuse to say, well, look what we did. We took the word urban away. That's always been odd to me. But as far as, I can speak in the Palooza space, which is very much the music industry. It's still events, and events move music. We ran into that with Hennessy, and they had a particular demographic that they wanted to focus on, and it wasn't the ticket buyers of Palooza. So moving into another liquor space, and not so much of where we were welcomed or anything of that nature, you just have people with leverage and power that have no real interest because they think there's no dollar there. And I think that's a huge issue when it comes to certain departments, labels, companies. I mean, even you'll see in the pop world, with there not being so much money in actual music sales, you have to go elsewhere to get your money. Sasha, I'm sure you guys can speak plain to this with everything Tory's doing. We have to find a way to monetize these things. When you go into these brands, that word urban gets thrown in. All right, what's the audience that he's going after? Like, it all comes full circle. It just happens to start with music, but music is no longer the profitable thing. That's just to create the celebrity and to create the fan base. So while the music industry is saying, okay, no, we don't want to use the word urban, we need everyone around the circle of the music industry that profits from the celebrity of Black artists to get on board with this message as well. And that first starts with representation. I've been in labels which we won't name because we don't need to throw anyone under the bus, I've been put in these labels and they have cut staff. So there's not a lot of people there. So they'll go to me knowing that I work within Palooza or work within this podcast or just the overall cultural space that I'm in, and ask me what they think the urban crowd would like here. And that's an issue. Did I love my paycheck? Sure. I should not be speaking for that. Can I contribute and help to that and empower that? For sure. I should not be the one in that department to tell you what Black people like. I shouldn't. It's offensive. That's my take.
That was powerful. I think you hit on a couple of interesting points. One being having to monetize outside of just music, right? And specifically, you know, with your Hennessy, you know, situation where they wanted to speak to a certain demographic, which I would assume is not urban.
Eddie,
No,
you know what?
was-
You know what's
was-
interesting? I was going to say. Well, I was going to back Rory's point up a little bit about that situation because, as I'm sure Rory knows, when they were just starting Henny Palooza, I wanted to get that into power so badly. Like I wanted to get behind it because Hennessy was one of our. They were spending huge amounts of money with power. They probably still are. So I thought, obviously, well, this is a perfect fit. Like the brand is already there. There's, you know, consumers are there. There's, you know, everything makes sense. I took it to the sales department. They said Hennessy wants nothing to do with it, which was so bizarre to me. And it angered me because selfishly, as a programmer, I'm looking at Rory's crowd and I'm like, holy shit, these are our listeners. These are the people that we want to listen to our station. These are the people that we're marketing to. So Hennessy can do an ad spend, you know, for these consumers, but don't want to have any of their branding or anything to do with it in a live atmosphere. It was super infuriating. So I understand completely what he's talking about there.
Wow.
I'm gonna have to.
I directly, go ahead, sir.
I was going to say, please allow me to jump and co-sign that all the way around, because one of the biggest frustrations, and this is something really on the radio side. I mean, you know, shoot, a huge part of my job isn't just the programming, but it's also having a complete understanding of the sales aspect of things. And I know Sascha could speak to this as well from what he deals with. You know, he does concerts and he just wants the people to come that want to hear the music, but the numerous amounts of clients that will not come and spend money on the quote urban stations because of the stereotype of what they actually think the audience is. It's one of the most frustrating things out there, because you can see clearly the power of the Black buying dollar, the power of the brown buying dollar. You see that. I live in Houston, Texas. It's overwhelmingly obvious, but there are still people that control those purse strings that will come in here with the short-sighted attitude because of the assumption of what the audience is about, and it's incorrect and it's wrong. And it's highly frustrating. You know, I'm fortunate enough to run stations that have been done very well from a ratings perspective, right? So you would look and say, well, the numbers dictate that you should be able to get on particular buys because we can prove that we have a large amount of people in particular demographics listening to the radio stations, but yet and still we get shut out of buys because people have a jacked up perspective of what the audience is about. It's all stereotypical. And so we're always fighting the uphill battle to articulate that, well, no, actually this audience is the tastemaker crowd. It is driving the economy here in the city, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, I'm sure, you know, Sascha has his dealings with that as well, you know, from his side of things, but it is very frustrating when
Terry,
Brian,
also, I'm sorry not to cut you off, but also talk to the
can.
point, because you can speak to it much better than I can, about the how people meter is set up and how Black and brown people are not represented in the main ratings of what these stations are. I mean, it's insane the ratios that they get that actually control the ratings of these stations.
You know, it's crazy. I mean, we could debate the PPM is, you know, it's a looks like a freaking pager, right? So like, come on, you know, when you're talking about younger ended stations that play hip hop music or whatever, these are tastemakers, these are cutting edge. We're cutting edge listeners. We don't want to carry a pager. We could start with that, right? So, you know, there's a lot of underrepresentation on the Black and brown side of things with the people meter. And so that whole thing needs to be looked at and addressed as well, to have a better representation of what people are actually consuming. And then just understanding that, I always like to say when I think of my stations, is that, you know, we're lifestyle brands. We want people to come and consume the brands that are about the lifestyle that we're, you know, that we're connecting with. And in particular in Houston, we also try to super serve, you know, what the Houston culture is about, and, you know, and make that marriage. I always would say, if you could take any one of my stations, pick it up, plop it down in a city all the way across the country, and it's equally successful, then I have failed, because my job is also to super serve the culture here in the city as it relates to the station and the particular demographic that we're going after. So, you know, it can be very frustrating, you know, to have, you know, top brands, and we know what we bring to the table, but to have big business sort of turn their nose at us and take the money elsewhere because they just don't think that our audience is worthy. It's kind of like, we'll sort of take your money, but sort of in the back door, and we just don't really want to associate ourselves and get in bed with you and be proud of that. And it's very irritating and frustrating.
So here's and I've been saying this for I don't know how many years. So what if urban adult contemporary, which again is just an antiquated term in of itself, because you know, the adult, if you remove the adult portion of it, you know, you have people like, you know, Summer Walker sitting number 2 right now at that format. You know, Lucky Daye has been there, Her is there. If we just name it R&B radio, and we name urban mainstream, you know, hip hop, you know, or rap radio or whatever, does that change how do you all, and anybody can obviously just jump in, how do you feel like that would change the perception and the perspective of whether it be buyers, whether it be artists, whomever?
I just feel it's calling it what it is, right? Like, we're not trying to find a nice name to say Black music. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is R&B radio. You know, it is hip hop and R&B radio. You know, like when you hear the station call signs, like they're not saying, you know, the home of urban AC, right? They're saying this is the home of hip hop and R&B.
Right.
It just seems a pretty obvious choice to me. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, Eddie, I could chime in here and say that I think that the adult urban format is at a crossroads, right? You know, like have a station, Magic 102.1. It's an iconic station in the format, 40 plus years in the game. But even for myself, looking at some point, we have to address the format in general and say maybe there needs to be a split of the format because of just the age gap. You've got people, quote, if you're saying like, you know, #1 target demo on the station, 25-54 adults, and as people are aging into the format, if you will, you know, they're just a different type of vibe, right? It's different from somebody who's like 50 or 60 or 55, 60 years old, who loves the music, loves the old R&B, and loves all of that. You know, they operate a little bit differently. So I do think that at some point, the format is going to need to address itself, and probably will be some sort of split so that we could really super serve the person that loves the R&B music that's coming in. You know, in my experience, when you have a lot of the older part of the demo, you know, they love to hear the library, right? They want to hear the classics. They want to hear all of that. They're less likely, you know, I'm not saying they don't like new music, but they don't love on it as quickly as, like, you know, other stations necessarily, or other formats necessarily. But there might be a 21-year-old person who's consuming Magic 102 because loves Lucky Daye, for example, and that's where the song is being found, and so they really rock with the radio station, but they're wanting to consume more R&B music at a quicker pace and falling in love with it quicker, and so forth and so on, and still love the library, but maybe would like the mix of that to be a little bit different. So I think as a format, and this is a conversation I've had multiple times, I think as a format, we're heading to a crossroads, and we're going to need to look at, you know, the future of the format in general, and what that needs to look like depending on the demographic that you're trying to get.
Sam, with Lucky, right? When you're going in to have your, you know, your label conversations, specifically, I guess, really about radio, right? are they automatically always, well, we need to start it here at Urban AC? And I would love to get your, your take or perspective from what Terri was speaking of. And again, because I used to manage an artist by the name of Ro James, who that was our conversations, right? Not getting stuck in that particular format. And now that's the lane, like that's the conversation. Like, how do I get him, or how do you get your artist out of that specific space and cross him over, whether it be to urban or to rhythm, eventually, well, I guess, according to, Sascha's, what he was told, you got to have X amount of streams before you can even be considered to go to pop radio.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it first of all, it starts with the artist and the music, right? It starts with the content itself. And like, that's where a huge part of the responsibility lies. So with Lucky, in his case, on his first album, Painted, he had a song, Roll Some Mo, that does make a lot of sense for the Urban AC format, right? But then he had a lot of other songs on that album that stretch from there, that evolve and expand over these lines that we're talking about. So, I mean, it's our jobs as management to, to balance all of that. Like if the radio department comes to us and says, hey, we got to start at the Urban AC format, like they're the ones that really want to play it, I'm usually not going to say no to that. I just want to make sure that we have a strategy and a plan to build from there, to use that to be able to expand across genres, but this, like I said, going back to the music, this has everything to do with the artist. Like Lucky Daye is a guy that plays video games and rides a skateboard and, like listens to hip hop all the time. Like he's not, he's not like just solely an Urban AC artist. It's really evident whenever you hang out with him, when you listen to his music, when you see his lifestyle. So like, I think that's where it starts, and it's my responsibility to like really pay attention to that as a manager, and then to make sure that we're following that and keep it as organic and as natural as possible. Because I think like fans going even to companies who want to endorse the artist, like they're paying attention, and whenever it feels real, that's when it works. When it feels manipulated, right? That's when it doesn't work and it's stale. So, that's kind of where it begins for me. But I'm a big proponent of, with an artist like that, with an artist like Tory, who we're just talking about, an artist like Kendrick, like these guys are special, man. I mean, like they don't belong in a small box. And they're the kind of exceptional generational talent that as many people as possible need to see and experience.
So Sascha, plain and simple, how do you break Tory outside of this box that he's been confined in for the last, 8?
We got the key. We got the keys to the box. We're out the box. We're good now. I think like, looking back on it, a lot of people used to tell me, people I respect, people I'm cool with used to be like, yo, I remember it like yesterday, it was Wale and Tory were in a heated debate. At this point, Wale had brought Tory to come out during his set when they were opening for Cole. This is years ago. Wale said to Tory, yo, you got to choose. You're a rapper or you're a singer. Tory was like, no, I'm both. He was like, nah, bro, you got 2 houses, a rapping house and a singing house. You can only save one of the houses. He was like, bro, I'm saving both houses. And I think like over time, people, have finally like accepted that, right? Like he is both. He is a rapper. He is a singer. No. He's just an artist. This dude is about to put out an 80s EP that samples George Michael. Then he has like an acoustic guitar EP. Like I'm grateful to just be here, and to help him through this process, because I think what he's going to do is really show, through his actions that you can't put him in a box. And I think that by virtue of his success, hopefully it's going to be able to establish a precedent that other artists aren't going to have to be put in that same box. I also think that there's something that needs to be done on education in regards to artists, right? Artists need to understand basic things like what the difference is between a net profit split and a royalty deal. I love, it's great that labels are donating money, but the second I saw a label that was like putting on like how this goes, brother, how about you teach people how to not get fucked on 555% loans on your deals, right? Like I think that there needs to be a conversation that goes on like, what do these artists, what are their resources ahead of them? And listen, not everybody's going to have a Sam or a Rory or a Geespin or a Terri or a Brock. Not everybody's going to have the right person beside them. But there needs to be minimal protections that exist for these artists that puts them in positions where you don't have guys who are from the pop space who want to sign a rapper telling us what will and won't work. I just went through hell, and I know I've learned a lot. And for me, like where we're on is we want to really be able to put artists in a position where they're not trapped in the box. Listen, let's touch base in 6 months. Hopefully this kid has some huge pop records, and now there's going to be a real conversation to be had. But I can tell you that for 5 years and change, I was told that pop radio was not an option. And I'm telling you that every single day, the dude that I deal with is a fucking pop star. And that's how we feel.
Sascha, quick one. Do you guys deal with it? Like, what's the experience in terms of the streaming companies? Is it a lot of the same? Like, if, you know, I guess Tory's a little bit different, but, you know, if you're going for New Music Fridays, are they telling you, oh, this may not be the right one? You know what I mean? Like, what's that experience been like, seeing as things are shifting along with that as well?
Yeah, I think like for a long time, you know, remember Tory, and y'all know, like that's been my guy, right? So I was never a dude that tried to go and sign a bunch of artists from the beginning. From when I met him, I was like, he's the one. I always felt that way. I still do. So, you know, there was a lot of things, information that I was being given that I took as facts. So like when the label says things like, yo, you got to have the sales department set up meetings with DSPs. And for a while, like you play that game, but then all of a sudden, like you start learning. And you know, us, because of the ScoreMore side, like Spotify hired us to produce Khalid's album release party or Meg Thee Stallion's album release party or all these different things. And I'm like, wait, I know people at Spotify. Like, why am I waiting on a label to set up meetings? And then there was one moment, to be perfectly candid with you, where I asked the label to set up a meeting at a time and a date that I knew was available because I'd already checked with the DSP. But when I went to the label and I asked the label to set it up with that particular DSP, the label said that they weren't available. To me, from that point on, I handled all DSP relations from there. You know, like I'm very fortunate because I'm not hitting up these people. You know, I don't know, the number is like 35,000 songs that drop a week, right? It's like 35, 40,000 songs. So like I'm fortunate, I'm only hitting them for the most part about one guy, right? So like it was a lot easier for me to go and have these conversations. I think when you are bottlenecking at a label and when there's 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 people that's responsible for talking to these editorial people about 100 artists, that doesn't make sense. Right. So what ends up happening is it's a bunch of noise, and the only thing that rides to the top are things with momentum. Well, how do you get momentum? If you don't have editorial, you need to make a moment. The labels aren't making moments, they're investing in them. So it's like for us, we had to kind of go back and like, listen, I'm not resentful for anything that happened. I'm very grateful for it. But to answer your question, like when it came to DSPs and really everything, over time, it became clear that no one was going to prioritize Tory like we would. And so that was the way that we were successful.
Sascha made one interesting point that I wanted to bring up, and I'll throw this to Brocky, is because he is on the label side. A lot of the companies have been putting up, oh, well, we're going to give X amount of dollars, 100 million, 25 million, whatever it is, to this, that, and the third. But it's important is the education piece. You know, information is always key. It's great that, you know, we and my company as well, you know, we're putting up, you know, money as well to donate. And we are, at least I am a part of the conversation as to where that is directed to. But Brock, I would love to hear, I mean, because your company, Warner, was the first one out the gate to commit, you know, money to causes. But is there anything that you guys are doing from a company standpoint to help educate or inform artists, and not necessarily Black artists, right? Artists in general about these things?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we definitely, Chris Atlas and Julian Petty have been, you know, amazing kind of at holding these town halls, you know, regarding the Black experience in the music business. And that's going to be an ongoing conversation that we're having. In terms of education, about, you know, deals and whatnot, I've always found that a lot of people don't bother to educate themselves about the music business. And unfortunately, and I'm sure we can all attest to this, you know, this whole business is a trial by fire. No one's ever really been so keen to give up information, right? Because then what that does is there's a bunch of people who are vying for this, to be in this thing that we're all a part of. And there's only so many spaces. So, in my journey, I've always had, amazing people, Chase, Infinite, No ID, hip hop, and a few other people that I grew up around in this, to give me information. And, another thing that I've utilized as much as I can is information from lawyers, who do these deals. And, having them explain to me like I'm an idiot, what exactly we're looking at, Again, I think that now that there's, social platforms and whatnot, this information is becoming more readily available. But again, it's kind of a thing where I really hope artists, educate. I find the best artists educate themselves on the business side as well. Like they have us managers, everyone around to ask questions to. But it's their business and it's their money. And everyone should.
There's a reason why the Scottie Pippen deal is illegal. Like we're still like, there's a reason why you can't do a rookie deal for 8-9 years, bro. There's minimal protections that exist. You know better, Brock. Like I've seen you, like you grinded your ass off on the bottom, but even before the music shit, you're already doing this. But you and I too, both of us benefited by having people who had been there, done that around us. A lot of people do not have people like that in their lives. I didn't before, I didn't know. And these lawyers are playing golf with BA, like with all due respect, like so.
Yeah,
100%. Getting
100%. I'm not defending lawyers, but what I'm saying is people need to take a very active part in their career, and not just on the music side, on the business side, and ask questions. You know what I'm saying? And again, I don't think anyone's going to do it for them. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not, it's not something that people are just going to do for other people. And, it's not a coalition of protection. Like we need, again, it would be great if there was, but people need to be very, stringent in asking questions and figuring out what it is they're getting into. I don't sign people to open-ended deals. That's not my place, nor is it my practice. But again, we need to, we need to educate these people on the questions they need to ask.
Yeah, kind of to both of your points, and Sascha, I thought the NBA one was a really interesting comparison because we see NBA rookies are forced to go to these seminars where they learn how to spend their money, and they learn about taxes, and they learn about mortgage, and they just learn how to survive as someone that just got a bunch of money. That is because the healthier they are, the more that benefits the NBA. Unfortunately, kind of how our system is within music, and I can't put this all in the labels because it is to the fans to some extent. Sometimes the more fucked up the artist is, the more money they're going to bring in, and the more money they're going to bring into the label. So yeah, you're doing a business deal with a corporation at the end of the day. We just so happen to make music with it. It's just a product at the end of the day. So educating an artist on that deal wouldn't be beneficial to the artist. I do think that's where someone steps in, like how with the Scottie Pippen deal, you can no longer make those deals because it's just bad business practice. I just think that it doesn't benefit labels anymore because fans like to see how fucked up artists can look and be, and it makes for great headlines. I don't think there's longevity in it, but it's not the same way with athletes.
For you to say that artists wouldn't benefit from learning about how deals work is crazy to me, bro.
Whoa,
and I have the utmost respect. That's the way that I from the end, it's like, but you're saying that it wouldn't benefit the artist for them to have.
No. It wouldn't benefit the label. That's
of course. Okay, I understand with you 100%. But who cares? Like, at the end of the day, the labels can always win, right? That's cool. I'm not mad at a label making money at all. I just think that in the same way there are minimal protections that exist for athletes, that there should be some type of minimal protections that exist for artists. If you sign a shit deal and you have a shit agent, the worst deal you're in is a 4-year deal. There are artists out there who are in 8, 9, 10, 11 year deals.
Yeah.
Nobody
is
explained
a
that
standard
to them. That's all I'm saying, bro.
Oh yeah, no, we're saying the same thing. I was just saying to the point of the athlete comparison, they want their athletes to be healthy and to be smart and to be on a great path. I know a lot of labels that perpetuate beef and all that bullshit. We saw it with 6ix9ine and the Trippie Redd thing. They're signed to the same label. It'll do better if we make sure these two people beef and hurt each other and hurt all the people around them, and then put them in a shitty deal. Like, it does benefit labels to some degree to see really fucked up artists, but you don't see them do that in the pop music world. They're not going to put those two artists pinned up against each other. No, they're going to complain on tweets about Roddy Ricch being #1 and let's try to find some loophole with my fans. Like, that's the way they're going to go about shit.
Right.
It's just, sometimes it benefits the label outside of obviously a financial gain to have artists be really stupid. And it's just an unfortunate fact.
You're right. You're right. But it's our responsibility as people who have had success and good mentors to give people accessible information.
100%. 100%.
I co-sign that. I mean, I do that now. I mean, it's not about me, but I'm just saying the spirit of, right? Because I'm like all of us, right? Wouldn't be here if it wasn't for somebody taking an interest and pouring into me just the same. So I always felt a personal responsibility to pay it forward, right? I will agree with Brocky, though. I have to say there has to be something in the artist that wants to, that needs and wants to understand that they are the CEO of their business. And I preach that all the time. You know, I have artists always, I need a manager, Why do you need a manager? I don't disagree. At some point, the right artist absolutely needs a manager, but it's like the perspective. Like, I love, Sascha, that you're saying, you know, your boss is who your boss is, right? A lot of artists are looking for the answer, the manager to be the end all be all and get me to the promised land. And it's really not how it works. So I have to really also agree with Brocky in the sense of, you know, I preach all the time. You are the CEO of your business. Like, there's Terri Thomas, the artist, and then there's Teresa, the CEO of the business. And we have to understand which way that goes. And so I will continue to be a person that preaches, learn, asking questions, figuring out the nuances of the business. You know, if you don't understand the contract, then you need to stop down and ask 10 people until you do. I had a guest on one of the things that I do, and that person said, oh, it was Shannara Butler, Pimp C's widow. Shannara said this: I have a lawyer to watch my lawyer. Right? So, you know, that's somebody who has witnessed and been in situations where things weren't, you know, set up in the best way, who learned the hard way and now has a process set up to try to protect herself and her interests. So, you know, I do think for those of us that are in the game, you know, to be responsible and be pulling artists aside and be sharing the information. It is a confidence thing. You know, when you do share information, a lot of times people are unwilling to do that because they think somebody's going to knock you off the block. Well, you know, I'm not that insecure. I know the people on this Zoom are not that insecure either. So, you know, we just try to do the right thing, and hopefully, you know, people will take a pause for the cause and consume the information. It is out there and available to you. Sure, a lot of people won't give you the game, but there are people out there that will. And as an artist, there has to be something in you that says, you know what, I see too many people get screwed over. That could happen to me. Let me get out here and participate in learning a little bit more about this business and not just taking things at face value. A lot of times we're so desperate for the deal, we'll take anything because we're chasing fame instead of taking a step back and having some confidence about yourself and saying, well, maybe I need to just not be so thirsty for it. There's an artist in Houston who just finally signed a deal. Everybody's been after this guy forever and a day. Beat King just ended up signing with Columbia. He hadn't signed with anybody. And he was like, I can kind of do okay on my own. And he continued to sort of take that. And then finally, you know, I guess the pocketbook looked right enough or whatever the case was. And he made a decision to go ahead and sign with someone. But he's been out here for a long time without doing that, because he didn't have a lot of confidence that he was going to get a deal that was going to benefit him in the long term. So, you know, I do think we have a responsibility to drop the game. I do think the artist has a responsibility to be open to getting it.
Yeah, I mean, these deals are confusing by design. And you know, sometimes like your common sense isn't going to be a good guide. I had an eye-opening experience whenever I went through my one and only divorce. And we brought in this third-party attorney who's a brilliant guy from Harvard, and you know, he's doing all the forensic accounting and all that, and he couldn't fucking figure it out. You know, he's like, wait, the whole thing's called publishing, but then half of it's a publishing share, and wait, retroactive recoupment for the producer, once it recoups, you go back to record one, but then that's the artist paying you twice, and all this kind of stuff. And it made me realize, wow, I'm used to this now because I've been doing it for a while. And that's what you have to do. You have to like learn all this bullshit that's confusing by design to the point that it's like second nature. And then once you get to that point, you can start making the right decisions. But it's built that way to confuse you as an artist, to make you turn off and go, I'm a creative man, I don't do this stuff. I'm just gonna hire somebody to do it for me.
Yep.
You're right, it's the artists that take that extra step of like really asking questions, taking advantage of having an attorney and a manager, and educating yourself as much as possible. And the thing to realize is it's going to benefit your career, it's going to benefit your craft, your content, your product, everything. It's worth the investment, absolutely. And you're right, Sascha, like it's our responsibility to hand it down and to share it. And there needs to be a lot more people doing that, because it's a really tough industry to get all the information on, no matter what aspect of it you're talking about.
And no matter how long you've been in it, it's still
100%.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I think, Sam, you know, you're so uniquely positioned as, you know, being an artist, right, of a successful, you know, group, transitioning eventually into an A&R role at a major label, and then managing it, you know, managing an artist. So you've seen it literally every side, which I think is, again, you're uniquely positioned to speak on this specific thing. Before we get out of here, I just want to touch on one other thing. A couple of weeks ago, I did a panel with No ID, Hip Hop, Chris Hicks and Shaw Money. And one of the things that No ID said is, you know, if we're going to get rid of the word urban, let's talk about getting rid of the word pop too. You go to your department and you say, I got a record and it's pop. Well, Black people don't go straight to pop. Labels don't just like Black artists into the biggest market. I'd love to just get any kind of, you know, thoughts on what Dion said, No ID said.
To me, that goes back to my Lizzo analogy. When I was sitting there and they're pitching me, Lizzo is an adult urban artist, and I'm listening to the work and I'm singing, this is pop music, right? I mean, this is the sound of radio now. No. She's over here. Well, no, but I'm listening to the music and it totally fits in with what we do on radio now, and you're having that dialogue. And then eventually, you know, I'm not trying to be funny, but she's pop, you know, she makes the music that fits on the pop station and also made music that fit on the adult urban station and music that fit on the box. She's that girl. So it was, you know, it's frustrating. And I know it's frustrating for artists. They just want to make their art, and wherever their art fits best and reach the audience that wants to consume it, may it be. But that's, you know, the audience isn't thinking labels. The audience isn't sitting there trying to put a label on their favorite artist. They just know that they rock with the music and that's what they want to hear. And I think, you know, there's a lack of understanding at who's consuming the product, because, you know, the artist just wants to make art, and whoever wants to rock with it rocks with it. And I think when on Sascha with the ScoreMore side of things, you can go plenty of the shows that Sascha puts together and see the Rainbow Coalition out there of people that are just there for the music. They're not sitting there thinking that they need to be in a particular box or there's a particular title. They just resonate with the music. So I think, again, my fear of removing the urban title is because there's not a complete understanding of equality and a complete understanding of representation and a complete understanding of that concept. So I think that people are going to still get screwed over. And until we fix that, I don't think we should worry about flipping a title. I think we need to fix the problem.
Eddie, to that point, I think what I'm hoping, and I think probably everybody here has seen it over the last 5 years, is that we're starting to get more of the numbers to back up the fact that we can see exactly who's listening to records now, right? Because we have the analytics from all the streaming companies to know exactly who's listening, how old they are, you know, what demo they fall under. And so I think, you know, the more and more we have the kind of back end info as time goes on, I think it's going to be less and less decision making by the people that really have no idea of, you know, what box these artists should go in. These artists are just going to find the fact that a group like Division, for me, it isn't on every single, you know, rhythm and urban station. In my mind, like, this is a great R&B band that's just stuck in UAC. I mean, that's where they get pushed, or even Lucky Daye to that point. Like, I mean, these are artists that should be heard by as many people as possible. And yes, there's going to be some people that don't get it and don't understand it, and they won't listen again, but it needs to be exposed. So I, you know, to that point, you know, whether or not it's pop radio or more the pop leaning playlists, they need to start rolling the dice and taking some chances on some of these artists that certainly deserve more exposure. And by the way, and I don't think they're going to get hurt by doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah,
No, I think Sascha and Tory were a perfect example of that during quarantine. Like, we were speaking how Tory may have not been taken seriously as a pop artist, but now I have tangible evidence that I can work through a pandemic, and these are the numbers that actually happen. You can't tell me I'm not pop. There's no way. You can't tell me that you're not going to open a certain budget because I'm grouped into this specific word at all. And I'm so happy that Sascha and Tory took that into their own hands rather than having the pop world steal their creative idea during quarantine radio and making it their own thing, rather than saying, all right, well, Tory's here, and clearly it's working with his audience that is a very profitable one, to say the least.
I appreciate
And by the way, even to that point, like, Rory, you even look at the podcast you're on. You guys are breaking all types of numbers at Spotify, which isn't necessarily catered just to one demo. Like, there is a wide plethora of people that are listening to a very hip hop and R&B centric podcast.
And G, to your point of having that actual analytics, you know, we had went to other DSPs prior to the Spotify deal. We went to other outlets. The number one thing for us was never the money. It was Spotify was going to give us access to our own analytics. So we knew exactly what we were worth. Most companies won't do that, because once you want to go re-up, now you have the leverage because you know your value. So going into these types of deals, the number one thing is to know exactly how much you are worth. And thank God the internet has given us some options of that, which is why I think, you know, independent for a lot of artists is the best route, because you do get a lot of your own analytics. It's just something that is probably the most valuable thing that we've ever had at this point now, because music industries are now just tech companies. We just had a Rolling Stone article about how much China is owning out of our three big labels. So I just focus on the numbers when you do these contracts, because they'll never tell you how much you're worth. That's why they'll make the money.
Well, I can tell you one thing. According to these numbers of people asking questions and attendees today, y'all are worth a lot, but I can't pay you, so I can't pay you what you're worth. I'm sorry.
I think too, just like Rory, first of all, I appreciate you saying that. Lastly, I think it is my job Tory is here to be the example and establish the precedent that we need. He is a Black-owned business. He is the boss. He needs to go out there and establish his success as an independent artist like we think we will. And then we can have this conversation in 6 months when he's done things that nobody else ever has.
Okay. Talk, Sascha.
Talk that talk.
Talk.
Before we get out of here, if you guys don't mind, I want to take a couple live questions. A couple people have had their virtual hands up, so I want to get to them. First person is Yakim Todd. I hope I pronounced your first name right. Yakim should be coming in. Yakim, you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
We can't see you. Can't come on with the video off though.
I'm sorry. I'm new to. Oh, there we go.
There you go. What's good, brother? How are you?
I'm good. How are y'all doing today?
Good, man.
Great, thank you. Where you from?
Coming out of Virginia. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I've been in Virginia about 7 years now. So Virginia's home.
Great. You having a very esteemed panel in front of you. What's your question?
Yes. I mean, main question. First of all, thank y'all for the time. Thank y'all for, coming on and giving us information. I appreciate it. This is my first time, obviously, as I've had problems with the video, first time on the Zoom. So, wanted to come in and get some knowledge there. I'm a producer, composer, bass player, and I'm just trying to get some information more so on what are the best ways, because obviously now with just the way that music is coming out and the streaming and everything that is happening, obviously it's changed the way producers get placements, get paid. And also just, get their music out to, people such as yourselves. So I'm trying to figure out what is sort of the best way to approach that when sending music or sending music from artists that I'm working with. What is the best way to sort of approach that when I'm looking at y'all, or should I take more of an executive role and just sort of release the music myself, sort of do my own label type situation with the artists that I'm working with?
I think I think it all depends on what you want. If you're trying to get your music heard right away, the best way to do it is to put it out. Good music travels and people find it. If you're submitting production, there's Instagram, your favorite A&R person or the A&R that works with the artist that you feel that your music is going to connect with the best, and send that to them. Hopefully get their email. I go through, I don't even know how many submissions a day. To the point, it's ridiculous. But again, I think always a direct connection. But if you have artist music that you're trying to put out, I would say the best recourse is to put out the music. If it's great, it's going to travel.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, Kim, thanks, brother. Stay safe out there.
All right. No,
have a good one.
Thank you very much. Y'all be safe.
I clicked them off too early. My bad. Let's take one more before we get out of here. Daphne with no last name. We got the picture. Hi, Daphne.
Hi.
We see your picture. We don't see you.
Hold on a second. Got it. There.
There you go. How are you?
Hi. I'm all right. How are you doing, guys?
Great. Where are you from?
I'm from Queens, New York. I do have a question, and specifically for Rory.
What's up? Shout out to Queens.
Hey, Rory. I actually don't live too far from Parks, by the way.
Just don't say the address out loud, and we're fine.
No. No, of course. So I'm from Queens, and actually I wanted to ask you specifically a question because I feel like, well, obviously I came here through you, obviously through the podcast. I actually moderate some of the group chats for you guys.
Okay.
There's like a whole little section in Twitter. It's pretty cool. But that's what I actually wanted to ask about. I feel like I always like to say, and maybe I'm not talking so PC about it, my political, my spirit animal would be Rory, because I feel like you actually are in the line of work where I would like to be. But I just feel like, since I'm 30, by the way, I'm like maybe a year older than you. I feel like I haven't exactly gotten to be where I want to be exactly with it. So how can I go ahead and get a launch pad? I have a lot of connections. I have a lot of networks, and they're within the industry and genre, in different genres. So I just kind of want to know, how do I actually get there?
I think now kind of back to the quick internet point we were making about, internet being direct to consumer and how much that's allowed us to see everything right in front of our faces rather than other people holding the access to a lot of things. I don't know exactly what it is that you want to do, but I think the resources you have in front of you and the people around you that may have like-minded or similar interests in what you're doing is really creating something on your own. And really pushing that and trying to figure out exactly what it is that you think will work for you guys, and using the resources around you. I mean,
Exactly.
if you told me a little bit more of what you wanted to do, I probably could have answered that a bit better. But I think now is the greatest time for people to be able to do things on their own. I think you no longer need the gatekeepers that you once needed to make an impact and to make a profit in this business. So I think having that mentality, the people that do have the money will pay attention once you get that moving.
That makes sense. It's just that this is what I feel like I have a lot of the tools. I would like to say the bureaucracy tools. I'm pretty savvy in like networking and law and things of that sort. And I have a lot of friends of mine that are like right there at the cuff of like different like genres of music, etc. Some are very viral, like in so many different ways, like just in so many different parts of it, like whether it's web design, whether it's like so many like different avenues. And I just feel like they don't really know how to maneuver themselves through these, through the industry. So I kind of want to be almost like a liaison.
That's where you are as the dot connector to take all these creative people and figure out how it can be much more of an impactful thing when everyone is working together. You know, you may have an artist that's really dope, but now you have a web designer. Now we have a website that can produce music. It's just dot connecting, I think, speaking on the amount of people that you know and you think are talented, is what you should focus on. It shouldn't be the people you think can launch pad yourself. I know it's horrible grammar, but I think with the talented people you're speaking about, you guys should all work together, and that can be the launch pad. It doesn't necessarily have to be the people you think can launch you.
Great. That's great advice. Thank you for giving that to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, that's a wrap, guys. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I want to thank my two East Coast friends, G and Rory, my two Central Standard Time folks, Terry and Sascha. Shout out to Texas. My West Coast folks, Brocky and Sam. Thank you guys, and we will see you next week.
Thanks, Eddie. Good to see everybody.
Thank you, Eddie.
Y'all be well.
Bye-bye.
Peace.